Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everybody. Growing without danger or without disappearing. We have got 3 economic experts. Sandrine Rousseau, you all know her. She's a representative of the environmental move, but she's also an expert in environmental economics. Timothée, who is an economist in Sweden and in Switzerland in the near future. In 2019, you wrote a thesis on the impact of environmental behaviors. It was published or released online, and it had a fantastic success. And Ghislaine, TSC director, and you are largely involved in the GIEC report, that is to say, the entity dealing with climate change. And I'm going to first deal with green growth. Is it a dream or is it reality? Last December magazine had as a headline growth. Is it an illusion? Is a green growth a magic formula to make us believe that capitalist economy will survive by banking on green ecology, circular economy, etc.? Is it a dream? Is it a fake or is it a reality? Christian is going to give an update. Thanks very much to all the participants. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you today to deal with this crucial issue. You can look at what's happened in the past, but you can also try and envisage our future. What happened in the last 10 years? Well, glass was half empty and half full. If I look at what happened worldwide between 1990 and 20, between 1990 and 21, world GDP increased by 10% and emissions by 62%. Why do we take 1990 as a landmark reference year? Because it was 2 years before the Rio summit at the time, and the Rio summit was landmark in terms of focusing on the climate issue. Well, 62% emissions is less than the GDP growth. We increased by 55% the French GDP, and whereas the emissions just decreased by 15%, even worse in Germany. So it's a real decoupling, but it's not great. It could be worse. We are good pupils. We are well behaved, so to speak, compared to other continents. We are doing better than other countries. We have made a great effort. We have introduced green policies, which have had some impact, some positive impact. Now, looking back into the past, are we able to continue this decarbonation of our economies? If I look at European decisions and French decision, we should decrease by 55% our emissions, 22 in France, 30 in Germany. And in the nick of time, in little time, we haven't got much time to do so, 4 or 5 years only, or 5, 6 years to at the most, and have to do half of what we did in 30 years' time. The question is, are we going to do this with green growth policies, with new technologies, or what? Or even more, even further, I would say, because let's hope that, well, we will be able to bank on new technological breakthrough solutions, as we heard yesterday with Mr. Bertrand Piccard. If we could develop mature green technologies making possible to produce less costly energy, we could do it, and we could have a green growth. But there is another scenario which is totally different. We also have bottlenecks, technological bottlenecks, and hindrances, and we need a great sobriety, which could lead to total lack of growth. Now, would you say that we have to go on like this, that there are positive things? Good morning, everybody. My answer is just no. Not at all. We are in a difficult, critical situation. The more we delay our efforts, the more we are in a real predicament, and the more efforts will have to be huge. So much so that we have to just think that society may not be going on the way it has been functioning. That's true. We have had less emissions per point of GDP. Well, we have increased CO2 emissions. That's obvious. Now, let's not think we are doing well because there is kind of decoupling or some kind of green growth. I think we have to really largely decrease the CO2 emissions in a very short time span, over a short time span. That questions a lot of our economic tenets. After 2 years spent at the French Parliament, I can tell you that there is no plan, no program to shift things, to change things, and we could we may think that there is a plan, but there isn't, and I have been really struck by the fact there is a total lack of plan, and this for all topics, all subjects. So it's up to the people to try and do something on their own to face climate change. I heard someone talk about clay, the impact of clay shrinking, and reverse movement in case of excess rainfalls, and one house out of 2 seems to be threatened by this phenomenon, and the insurance system is not in a position to be able to pay damages to pay the damage to the owners. So this raises a huge problem. Let's not forget that people take a loan over a 30-year period. They invest all their savings, and if their house falls into pieces, nothing can be done. And only 30% of the inhabitants hit by this phenomenon are compensated by insurance companies. It's just an example, this clay phenomenon. Let's go back to the heat wave last year. It was unbearable in some French regions. What was decided in terms of public policy? Answer: nothing. That means many households have equipped themselves with air conditioners, etc. Instead of trying to benefit from a policy consisting in reducing CO2 emissions. So it's not a problem of people, we are not at all facing a situation in which people refuse to change. We are in a totally different situation. If you look at sociological studies, you'll see that people are ready to make efforts. Everybody understands the political the ecological challenges, environmental states. The implications are not always clearly grasped or understood, but people do understand there is a real climate hazard, and most people are convinced that climate change is a huge challenge. Up to, well, more than 80% are convinced this, but we lack a plan to monitor this transformation. We cannot think that there'll be green growth, and that green growth is enough to change. I think we have to think differently in terms of fundamental needs in order to simultaneously ensure social cohesion. I suppose you have got your plan. Well, yes, of course, but what is missing, it's a plan sector by sector. I'm totally horrified when I hear that fuel vehicles have to be replaced by electric cars. It's not at all possible. It's absolutely impossible. It's silly. There are not enough resources, and we need a mobility plan. We need a plan to convert industries, and it doesn't exist. So the only question we can hear of is, are we going to open a lithium factory, manufacturing a lithium factory in the Cantal area? But what is this? It's nothing. And in fact, we do have to transform our means of transport, etc., etc. Nothing has been planned, nothing has been thought of. So that's why we do need to gain a majority at the French Parliament. Thimothée, you have realized that planet protection planet protection couldn't be reconciled. Capitalism is based on institutions developed with money-earning companies, with a consumer aim, with a focus on consumerism. It's also welfare, with a welfare state, heading for an economy encouraging growth. Going for sobriety policies, whose magnitude would be so huge that we would to have changed our consumption habits, and in which we would have to accept growing less. Is something I wanted to stress. But let me go back to green grass, circular economy, sobriety. You think that all these moves won't help to decrease or to shift the trend, rather? Well, we made several mistakes. We've made several mistakes in the last few years. We thought that decarbonation was the solution, with capital T, capital S, and decreasing carbon emissions is one color. But we also have got our relationships to water or deposit management. We have to take on board all these elements, not a single element, to understand what ecosystems can really offer. And Sandrine did explain this very well. emissions, CO2 emissions could decrease with e-cars, but the footprint of the different materials will still increase, inducing loss of the biodiversity. And so we have to stop only focusing on CO2 emissions. We have to think more widely. We have to think in terms of sustainability. We must learn. We must learn from the economic experts who have tried to decouple things to lessen the pressure on the environment. That helps to identify some relevant policies such as circular economy, etc. It did help and it is still helping. But is it going to really help and reach this green threshold below the planet threshold? And we have to do more. We have to do more, that's for sure. And if you take three different chapters, as the international group of experts on climate change are doing at the moment, we will have to mobilize to use the corresponding and relevant tools for each of these quoted chapters. And the avoidance policies will have to be so huge that we will have to go through macroeconomic growth to succeed. And something hasn't been mentioned. Another mistake we made when looking at greenhouse gas emission, we have to take on board some other factors. We only cover half of our emissions because these plants do not take on board the imported emissions. I think they reach 51%. Microphone, please. We have got imported emissions, 9 tons per inhabitant per year. We should decrease down to 2. So it's not 50% of decrease. It's even more, it's 80% to be accurate.
Quelles alternatives? Alors, le mot décroissance fait peur parce que c'est moins de consommation, moins de voyages.
So that means traveling less planes, less imports, etc. It's scary. It's less and less for many people. Total lack of growth. The exact contrary. It's we are here dealing with people's lives, and people are still very, very happy to be able to the shop next door, the supermarket next door, to buy a beer. How are you going to deal with all this? How are we going to tackle this issue? Decrease in production, decrease in consumption. If we can't go green in terms of production and consumption, we will have to do much to go for a sobriety policy to limit or to decrease the footprint, and plan taking care of social justice and social welfare. What does that mean? It means that we have to be aware that budgets are limited, and the people's budgets are limited, but state authorities' budgets are limited too. I mean, if you spend more than you earn, your bank expert is going to call you. But we will have to do all this going through biophysical constraints which add themselves to the financial constraints and economic constraints. That means making choices. We have a limited carbon budget, so we have to make choices. I have 24 hours a day. What can I do during these 24 hours? I have X euros per month. What can I do with these X euros? Doesn't mean having a choice between a wealthy economy, rather an economy of wealth and an economy of poverty. I think that people will realize little by little gradually that all the KPIs, managing our human activities, can be left aside vis-a-vis different types of KPIs, which one be purely administrative KPIs. You can't just sit down, we're going to cool the climate by raising our hands and voting. We will have to agree on biophysical limitations to be complied with, and starting from this, we will have to make the corresponding economic decisions. It's not only sacrifices, it's social benefits. If you use less cars in a city, you have less pollution, less lung diseases, positive multifactorial factors in terms of well-being. And so if you are doing away with the negative factors, we may reach a situation in which we will have less carbonation, and will have a positive impact on health, and you will have more free time. Having more free time is something which makes me so happy, and it's a real revolution in terms of mindset. For decades, we have been thinking that growth was good, was positive, but what the impact on employment and on the economy? What's going to happen to farmers, to butchers, and the like? I just gave you the answer. I didn't use the word unemployment. I used the expression having more free time. Why is employment a problem? Because you lose part of your income, and because you cannot buy what you need. That is to say, a flat, a house. You can pay for school, kindergarten for your child, etc. But what do we need is a transformation of our economic models. All the people working in advertising, flights, airline companies, can be unemployed and reallocate their activity to different topics. So we have to do away with quantity and favor quality. It's real utopia. Tomorrow's society. Madam, you often say that stopping growth. When you spoke, you had your debate with Mr. Jadot, you said that lack of growth.
Quelle est votre position sur cette vision?
Has no economic tenet. Well, I think we agree. We kind of agree, but we don't agree with the words used. When we say décroissance in French, that is to say stopping growth and having a downturn, even a recession, and this is something economists do know. We include the lack of productivity, less working time, increased debt. That looks like a totally new model. So there is a limitation to this proposition. Of course, it's relevant. It can have an impact. It's quite interesting. But I think you have to think differently, and without sticking to these KPIs, to these indicators. Otherwise, you are going to remain living in a minus world, and you can't envisage a better world. And we have got a twofold objective. We have to change our economic model, and we need the right people to do it. And we have to link up the two, to link both. That's why I privilege the concept of a reform of our social and ecological system, the right to laziness. This concept have mentioned on several occasions, has been criticized. But I think that people do need to have more rights if we want them to accept the ecological transformation. We have to think of a world in which the people think that they'll be living in a world which is better for them. And it's not obvious these days, especially in light of the loss of biodiversity, of the very intense climate hazards. So how can you do better in an uncertain world? Do you have to allow for more free time, to increase social protection, to have better health systems, to have a better sharing of resources? And when going for this opposite trend to growth, down trend in growth, I think you forget something quite important. How to convince people that they have their change, their way of life, and to pave the way for a new society. Well, so the real issue has to have people on our sides, how to have them agree with all these moves. I think we have forgotten a vital point. The wealthy emit many more emissions than the poor, and you wrote a fantastic book, Let's Slow Down or We Will Perish, and stating that half the world is consuming most CO2, but all the efforts which are valorized from a social viewpoint, all the ecological efforts which are valorized are efforts made by the wealthy. If you ride to work, it means that you live in downtown, that you have no child to take to school, that you have no shopping to do, that you are in good health, that you have got kind of normal working hours, living conditions which are, in a nutshell, more privileged. So you just write and you are congratulated because you are writing to work. But what about the less privileged, the poor, who have to drive to work, who have to lower their room temperature because they can pay the heating bill, who are making a kind of compulsory efforts imposed on them, may pollute less, but they won't be congratulated less, They won't be looked at positively. It is a fundamental social problem. So that's why we have to turn from social justice to a fair share of efforts to be made, a fair share, and the wealthy have to do much more than riding a bicycle.
J'ai vu qu'il commence à y avoir des questions.
So we're getting a few questions. Christian Gollier, could you please take the floor, because maybe you want to counteract this. Okay, less work, less pollution, but who's going to foot the bill at the end of the day? I ride my bike to go to work, but it's 40 kilometers each way, and they live in the countryside. It's 1 hour 40, and you ride the train. You never use a plane. You never come from Toulouse with plane. I think we've gone through seen a number of crucial things. Let me try to express the unsaid. We have a problem. LFI, extreme left, more than 5%, which means that the values conveyed by ecology responsibility to future generations is not there. It's not there because in spite 2% and 5% 50 years later it's pretty obvious. How can you get the message across? No, transition is a must. It will benefit of not acting. The cost of non-action will be huge. I'm referring to a paper published last year. The cost of not doing anything might well be higher than 1 billion of CO2. Carbon tax is 42 per ton of CO2, so we're very far away from it. The cost of not acting is huge, and there are so many things we could do that would end up costing far less than the cost of not doing anything. So acting is costly. Decarbonization, the production of steel accounts for 8% of global emissions, replacing steel produced by high furnaces, as we've been doing for many years, even centuries, by carbon-free steel made of with a green, which doubles the cost of steel. So would you say that is bound to increase the price of a car? Some are going to be scared by what it takes to achieve green growth. Maybe people will go for zero growth or even negative growth. This is what I started with at the beginning. We'll have to end up with a proper mix. It all depends on our capacity, our ability to find the right strategies to end up with the cheaper solution, to go for sobriety, riding our bikes, for instance. Even though it's a waste of time. You have to factor in the fact that so many green actions that produce another benefit in terms of better health. I sleep very well when I ride my office on my back. I do sleep better. Even though you factor in all these benefits, it doesn't work. The proof is that, in spite of the policy that 80% of the population is in favor of a green ecology and transformation society, in terms of cost, people are against. I have to refer to the yellow vests increase triggered by the increase of the carbon tax. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yellow. The yellow vest movement was triggered by that, but did people think about the effect? Is the lack of social justice that triggered the movement? Did they take into account the element of a constraint with the carbon tax? You can't think about from Paris only. You have to think in terms of territories. And this is something which is really a blind angle with the public politicians. Rather than using the word non-growth or zero growth, could you use the word oriented or directed growth? Let's recognize that economists may not be the best, most creative minds in the world. The words we use when we refer to growth or ungrowth are working instruments. I wrote my thesis. I say that the level of production and consumption, of course, I use the word ungrowth. another word. It's a bullet word, where the very word engrosse or décroissance in French makes us nervous, uneasy. So we had discussion on this yesterday. Is it really growth per se that should become green, or is it not the well-being, the common good? Maybe in economy, we look at a finger pointing the moon rather than the moon itself. So the word décroissance and growth is useful if it stimulates debate, discussion. I like conviviality, common good is gold. Post-growth is getting used more and more often. It's very good because it helps us anticipate, and it's invitation you have proposals to make. Whenever you hear a concept that triggers, encourages debate, and point at things that we haven't used so far, we'll take it on. And when the debate or discussion will be finished, will be over, and we switch to a new concept. In fact, you are trying to show that another universe is possible. For most people, there is a capitalist system, the communist Soviet regime that comes, but even if you delve very deep in our imagination, you're trying to develop, to create the idea that maybe we could live with cups, one cup after another. You use a phrase here, the libertarian municipalism. You recognize that it's pure utopia, is it not? But that's precisely what it is all about, providing for a different future. Is it what you're trying to do? Yes, exactly. We've suffered too much from this black and white vision of an economy that's either capitalist or communist or something to do with the developing country hasn't made its choice there. I don't like that vision, which I find is really poor. Now we should have different view. Even within the French economy, there is such a diversity of sub-economies, just like in a garden. See, what will the future economy will made of? There's a shift in France where a social and solidarity economy rather would account for 9/10 the whole of the French economy would be a major transformation, not to mention the future of the social economy. So this so-called libertarian economy, decent, that doesn't really correspond to the state communism, which is what comes into mind when you refer to the Soviet Union. In fact, are just invitation to go for hybrid forms of economy. And this, I think, is our responsibility to provide the population with as many options. In other words, the toolkit is far more diversified than we think. There are a number of niches. Internet was a niche. Smartphones were a niche, and became the backbone of our system. Maybe zero long-term unemployed people. Maybe all these things that happen in a kind of a dreamlike environment are in fact seeds that might as well end up being very powerful. In your so-called municipal economy, in other words, small is beautiful, corporate is municipal is small entities that decide of their own fate. You're saying that you couldn't possibly have any nuclear plant or even the smallest nuclear plants because they couldn't be funded if the decision-making level is on a more a smaller. I can't remember writing anything to that effect. Maybe in the Journal de la Terre. Anyway, my line of reasoning, remember what I said, democratic planning so that decision can be taken, what's the best allocation of money to optimize, to maximize the well-being of the population. This is the question of the 21st century. I spent a lot of time reading literature on ungrowth or degrowth. I would say once again that slow down or perish is probably very interesting in this field. But Thimothée is in favor of a ungrowth à la Rousseau type by giving power to man and explain to him that he's trapped in a consumerist system by getting rid of advertising for some products. Um, Detergent, for instance. I don't think that asking humans to do good for the interest of mankind as a whole, while this will require many efforts for benefits that it won't be able to use. Now, other authors use climate change as a substitute to the lack of Marxist or Leninist revolution, to recreate the conditions of a equalitarian society. That's another debate, another topic. And this takes us back to what you have on the screen here. How do you guarantee individual freedom? Because some people, ungrowth or degrowth goes against capitalism, eventually ends up with the kind of authoritarian regime. This is one perception that some people have with growth, and this lends me to referring to this wonderful painting on the wall there, someone killing a whale. We've limited the individual freedom, haven't we? So ungrowth, so degrowth is very much correlated to increased environmentalism, the rights of nature being part and parcel of the right of nature, the right against ecocide, animal law, etc. I am an economist. I'm arguing that this is bound to slightly change the mix of constraints. Many things could not be allowed or were not allowed because you are poor. I can't use a plane because I don't have enough purchasing power, so I can't have access to a plane. Maybe in the future I won't be able to fly because there's too much carbon around that it's not authorized. It's not fully decentralized. You can have a decision at the national level, and then we've decentralized to local authorities who decide how they want to use their carbon budget, and the households and companies decide. So it's kind of a cascading down. I've heard a lot about innovation yesterday. To me, this is the concept. What does it how does it work? This cooperative, it brings people back around the table, people who want to express their views, which is an absolute must if you want to increase the well-being. It's not always the best approach, particularly as if you have more inequality. Now, if we can beef up democratic muscle, we'll be able to create solutions which have been unexplored so far. My assumption, working assumption, is where are corporations, where are the nations or district, maybe democratic pockets, and to consider that these are R&D departments that work on the more sustainable economies. Now, which political regime would be in a position to organize this post-growth society? Well, freedom first. I'd like to pick up on freedom. I was told that the freedom of some stops when the freedom of others is jeopardized. So the freedom of the wealthiest endangers the freedom of all the others, So this is a fictive or fictional freedom which works at the basis of our societies. It's freedom by money or thanks to money. Money being a tool that helps us emancipate us and get rid of collective constraints. Sorry for using this concept, but it's not possible anymore. You have to rethink the equity and freedom. You have to organize spaces where everybody can be free. I'm using this example, which is really telling and typical of what should not happen. If you live in the provinces and work with elderly people staying at home, Your working hours can be very long. You start at 7 or 8 in the morning and finish your working day at 8 or 9 o'clock, and you need your car to drive from one elderly person to another. So you've been riding your car for years and hours and hours, and it doesn't add up to 8 hours. So at the end of the day, you've been working very long hours, you've been traveling or driving for hours, but your wage is minimum because three-fourths of caregivers do not achieve the poverty line or exceed, sorry, poverty line. And these are essentially women. So what can you, how much freedom does she have? The word liberty, what does it mean for that person? So having more free time and having more free time is really giving you greater freedom. And this is why it's so bad that capitalism do not help out, because the word of freedom is emptied of its meaning. We have to think about how to create new liberties, new freedoms. Very very close to the libertarian. You talk a lot about the Rassemblement National with this concept that we're going to decide for our sake. And in other words, fuck the system, to say so in a very elegant words. Municipalism, municipalist liberty. What kind of political organization can you invent to help people join another system? Feeling happy. Look at people filling up their trolleys. They're not ready to forego their television, their weekends, and their smartphone. Many of them do get benefit from the current system. So how do you organize a shift to a different system? Could you tell us how do you shift to another system? Well, no other. It has to be democracy. There's no other system. But it can't be centralized democracy. This is, I'm sure of it. To me, ecological transformation cannot be achieved in the same way whether you are deep in the countryside or in Paris. It doesn't represent the same reality. You will need a car. You can't achieve the same transformation. As long as the ecological transformation will be perceived from the centralized point of view, you can't make it, you can't do it. I cannot imagine any other possibility rather than giving more powers, democratic powers at local scale. I think the regions are probably the best level to think or to find the right place with pockets for self-management communes, organizing the possibility to self-manage, how people locally will have a hand over their own transformation, and then they will accept their efforts because they will have decided the form, the magnitude of the efforts they have to make, but also they have to set out their own priorities. Christian, you had something to say on how this new system could be organized. And then I will ask you whether you're still optimistic as to what we are going through these days. No, I don't think that decentralization will be this a solution. No, you have to centralize the climatic policy at European level because there are so many problems, difficult to interact on the electricity market, and more basically the fact that each individual nation has, and we've said it, repeated over and over again, France alone can't achieve full decarbonation. This wouldn't make any global impact. So it's not feasible. Well, of course, France has to make efforts because at individual level, maybe it can say 1 billionth of CO2 emission, yet I have to make my own personal efforts at individual level. This is absolutely true. So, you know, it's the lone rider policy. It's very complicated for individual. It's very complicated at corporate level. It's very difficult at political level, while all other parties fight for a positive ecology where no one will be required to make efforts. No, you have to put your life together and to accept sacrifices, both to wealthy people and poorer people. So it requires a global fight against CO2 emissions. Maybe we'll have to start with the sobriety, with the electrical bicycles for both wealthy and not wealthy population, but also accept degrowth or ungrowth unless you can organize our system and use more energy sources which are not expensive. I'm not sure that degrowth or ungrowth is the proper route, because the price of a carbon we need to operate to achieve a zero emission by 20. Maybe the price of carbon will be 300,000 euros per ton, and then there'll be ungrowth. But this is really will be an absolute requirement to achieve our objective. We're coming to the end of the debate. Please, I saw you were not. We looked most unhappy when Christian referred to a decentralized management. No, I think there are a number of centralized objectives to follow. Well, you said that France is only accountable for 1% of emissions. I'm sorry. I didn't say that France should remain idle and inactive. No, France, 1% of the global population, 1% of the global population has colonized and enslaved 1% of the global population, and a declaration of human rights. So, in fact, when it comes to dominating the world, we never hesitate. Now, France has one responsibility to set the example, to go for it, and specifically on a green decolonize thinking process, decolonization of this domination relationship. What is a responsibility? Well, this is our responsibility. So we wait 1% of emission, but responsibility is on climate change. My political responsibility is much above 1%. To conclude, clearly, these are very complicated issues. We had red hats or caps, or red caps, and then the yellow vests. Now we have different difficulties with the European elections and anti-green voting legislative. We haven't made much progress, have we? So it's going to be extremely difficult to steer our course. Are you still optimistic? Do you still think that your ideas will prevail? I'd like to point at a paradox. There are two narratives. When it comes to ecology, what are we going to lose in terms of freedoms? It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, and it's the prisoner system. Let's follow and act last. When it comes to building planes, we are extremely ambitious. We're going to be the first ones. You're going to be leaders in the market. And what about reversing the argument and say, okay, maybe today worst challenge or most difficult would be to become social developers. We're going to try things that nobody tried in the past in France. You can afford it. You reminded we are one of the richest countries in the world. We can afford this. It means that we are responsible. We have to attempt things that nobody has tried to do before. I would very much like for ecology to grow. Christian rightly said you can't really promise that you will increase well-being with the declining inequalities. No, you will have to make choices. And this is going to be complicated in terms of navigating, but we can try. At least we can try and reverse the narrative transition, and this will change the mix, the momentum discussion. Those who feel attracted by this kind of debate, I can't imagine that very creative people are sent out to build aircraft, fighters, and the rest, how could live on the planet Earth. Now, ecology should become the most exciting Rubik's Cube of the century. Sandrine, how do you see things? Are you at the bottom of the wave? Is it a reflux? What are you seeing? How can you interpret this trend? Well, at some point you had marches for the climate, kind of a euphoric environment. Yes, I think that we are in picking up the political debate, but those that have no interest in achieving a green revolution. Look at Bolsonaro, Trump, Orban, Meloni, all of them. The French Rassemblement National, all of them has interests which are closely related to oil. This is what Trump has done. He's organized his campaign with the oil companies. Bolsonaro funded this campaign or had it funded by the agro industry. Those who cut down trees in Amazon. Bolloré has direct interest in the logistic and transport. So, in fact, these people are preventing ecology to achieve its ends. So this is what we need to do, create a new narrative, an ecology narrative, when we go back to, well, somehow I feel that it's going to explode one way or another, but it's really a creative explosion. I can't tell you exactly what the new society will be, because we don't know what it's going to be. But what we knew for sure that we need to take hold of our destiny, and this is what they are doing at the moment, or perhaps by going back to working on collective fate, destiny. I think that other path is being drawn. I have proof of this. Look at what's happening these days. It's unexpected. It's never been done before. We are really in a situation where we have to invent new forms of life. Perhaps, as I'm talking to you, we are working on this, even though we're not fully aware of it. Christian, what about how are you feeling? Are you pessimistic? It's always been like this. For the past 20 years, I've been working on climate change, public debate on this issue. It's kind of a roller coaster. I've seen this before. I was very impressed in the past by the European Green Deal, which is extremely successful. So I'm awaited with bated breath from the political program of the Front Populaire when I see the extreme leftists discussing a 5/5 VAT. Well, they're inventing the VAT, green VAT. I'm bound to see a backlash on this, I'm sure. But at French level, I would be very, very worried if the National Assembly wins, because a 5.5 VAT on fossil fuel would be exactly at the opposite end of what we want to do. Even though there is a problem with the social inequalities, obviously, that we have to address and redress. Carbon tax, of course, can be redistributed on the more lower end of the social scale. Thank you for taking part in this debate. Very interesting, from utopia to reality, and how events can accelerate processes. Thank you all. So, I'm supposed to conclude this event, this common goods. It's a very topical subject. We'll have to make major choices in the weeks to come. Individually, we've built a liberal democracy, even though it's not perfect, but we've done a great deal. Clearly, this liberal economy is failing. We cannot implement mechanisms whereby each one would take the share of a collective effort. But common good, all of us must contribute to achieving common good, and this event, which brings the challenge close to the TSC, is doing what it has. We are first line, front line. We're trying hard to work for a better world. I'd like to thank Challenge, all those who have taken part in the roundtables, the technical staff who has been working on the organization of this project for many months. I'm very proud with this result we have achieved, in particular the fact that this year we had a great diversity in the points of view and very careful listening by all. Thank you very much and have a good day.